Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon or good evening, depends on wherever you currently might be. In this week's video we are going to talk about the modern history of the Chinese car industry. And what I'm going to focus on is the joint venture between Volkswagen and SAIC, so between Volkswagen and the Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation. And the most things which I'm going to say are based on this book here, written by Martin Posth. It's 100,000 Tage in Shanghai, so 1,000 days within Shanghai. And it was published in 2006, where Martin Posth, inside this book, is talking about the challenges and about his experiences by setting up the joint venture between Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, or during this former times it was the STAC, so the Shanghai Tractor Automotive Corporation, and Volkswagen, to set up this joint venture within Shanghai Anting. And yeah, he's just describing this whole process which evolved during the 80s. And within 1984, in October, the Shanghai Tractor Automotive Corporation and Volkswagen Group, they signed the contract to establish the joint venture. And the original first talks between between Volkswagen and the Chinese government, they started within 1978, when the opening up in China was happening. And also, during this time, the Chinese government tried to bring in a lot of foreign companies to access their capital and to acquire their know-how, their management know-how and technical know-how. And when Martin Posth were coming into China during, first in 1984, he said that the Shanghai Tractor Automotive Corporation, their whole company, the whole factory was just very poor and in a wretched condition. And he says that in China during this time, you really couldn't compare China and Europe in terms of living standards. So China was very poor and chaotic, he said, and for Europeans it was just very difficult there. But he said that he could feel the enthusiasm and the optimism and the drive in China. So the people were motivated to move and to develop. But let's start with the actual beginning of the Chinese car industry. And this all began with the FAW, so with the first automotive works, which was set up in 1959 or 1953 in Changchun in Jilin province, where they were building the Chinese car of the red flag, which was called, I think it's a Hongqi in Chinese, and they were building this with the help of the Russians. So this was number one automotive works in China. Then there was also the SAW, so the second automotive works within China, which is located in Sheyuan, close by Wuhan. This was set up in 1969. And then there was the STAC, so the Shanghai Tractor Automotive Corporation, which was set up in Shanghai. And there they were producing this. It was set up in Shanghai in 1959, and there they were producing since then the Shanghai sedan a little bit later. But first they were producing the Fenghuan. This is the Phoenix. At the beginning of the joint venture of Shanghai STAC and Volkswagen, it wasn't the German initiative to bring these things into rolling. It was the Chinese side. Especially it was the Chinese Minister of Machine Engineering. During this time they still had this Ministry of Machine Engineering, and he came to Germany and actually wanted to set up a corporation and wanted to visit Mercedes. But when he saw in Germany, there weren't so many Mercedes actually on the streets, but the most cars on the streets were Volkswagens. And then he decided that with his delegation, they just go to Wolfsburg to visit the Volkswagen factory. And then They were just coming at the gate of the Volkswagen factory with their blue Mao jackets, and they talked to the guy at the gate. Hello, we are the Chinese Ministry of Machine Engineering, and we would like to talk to a deputy here of Volkswagen. And then they also started some talks, and of course Volkswagen also was interested, and from then on this cooperation started. I think it's a very interesting thing to know. And during this time, the big other car industry corporations like General Motors or Toyota, they said, China? No, we don't go to China. Why should we go to China? But Volkswagen was keen to go there, and also the Chinese government, they were keen to work with Volkswagen, because Volkswagen, they had a good policy which China was fan of, because Volkswagen said we want to quite soon reach a high percentage of local production. So all components should quite fast be produced within China. And now my book just fell out, and I'm walking here on the Kühlkopf, on this natural reserve place. And to give you some introduction and some comparison how the automotive industry in 1985 looked like, I have some numbers for you. And so while in Germany and in the USA in 1985, per 1,000 persons there were 500 automotives. While in Japan this number was around 220. But in China we were still per 1,000 persons only at 8 cars. Yeah, and this is in 1985 when Volkswagen and the Shanghai Tractor Automotive Company set up their joint venture and started to build cars. And they were mostly only building the car Shanghai Santana. And they had this goal in mind to come within 7 years of production already up to a 70% to 80% local production of car parts. And this joint venture was set up in an equity joint venture with shares of 50% Volkswagen and 50% Chinese side. And this 50% of the Chinese side was like this. It was 25% of shares had the stock, so the Shanghai Tractor Automotive Corporation, and 10% was held by the China National Automotive Industry Corporation, so the CNIC, the CNAIC, which president during this time was Rao Bin, also a very important person for this joint venture. And the last 10% was held by the Bank of China on the Chinese side. And yeah, how did the management work and the construction of this company's set up? It was like this. They had a board of directors of 10 persons. 5 persons were represented by Germans, 5 persons were Chinese, and they had the ExCom, so the Executive Committee of Management, out of 4 persons. And 2 persons here were also German and 2 were Chinese. And the 2 Germans was one, Martin Posth. He was for the management and economic fraction. And then there was also Paul, Dr. Hans Paul, I think, and he was for the technical side. And the most important Chinese were, as I said, Rao Bin and Zhang Changmo. He was the representative speaker of the ExCom, and also Wen Po Li. He was the representative in Beijing for this joint venture. Martin Posth is also talking about the complications, challenges, but also opportunities they had with the Chinese workers within their joint venture now. Because the stock, just such as the Saw or Chang'an automobile, they were all traditional Chinese state-owned companies. So within these companies, they couldn't just even lay off workers, and they had fixed plans, and yeah, they should keep up with these plans. So they couldn't lay off these workers, so what only the last option they had is just to keep them and to train them. So they tried all kind of different trainings. And another disruptive thing between the Chinese side and the German side was that having expatriates, so German workers within the company, they had around 30 to 50, and during this time one German worker was at the same cost and equal to 200 Chinese workers. So the Chinese side definitely didn't support having so many German workers, because they were so expensive and they had to take care of their capital. In 1987, a small delegation of Volkswagen, they went north to visit the FAW, so the first automotive works in China, which by then was the largest automotive factory within China. And they were talking about also a second joint venture option with FAW. And they were also successful, because now the joint venture between FAW and Volkswagen is the largest one. And during this time they were talking about producing the Audi, which in the 80s already belonged to the Volkswagen group, to produce the Audi 100 and Audi 200 at Changchun. The Chinese side, especially within the Shanghai mayor and yeah, the delegations of Shanghai, they weren't so happy to hear that they also want to go to, that Volkswagen also wants to move to Changchun. Of course not, yes. 1986, the local produced parts of Shanghai Volkswagen still was only at 4%, and then Zhu Rongji, at this time the Chinese what was it, of the state's economic commission, he said, if this local produced percentage doesn't quite soon rise up to 40%, we will close the Shanghai Volkswagen project. And then soon this measures took effect also, because they were starting in Shanghai Santana localization community. Until 1988, this percentage rose up to 31%. So I think this video is long enough already, and I will stop talking about the book of Martin Posth, this 1000 Days in Shanghai, and I will be starting to talk about Shanghai Volkswagen today. So today, this Volkswagen group is represented in China basically by two joint ventures. This is first the joint venture with SAIC, yes, with the Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, and the joint venture with the FAW, the first automotive works in Changchun in Jilin province. In 2019, only the Volkswagen brand sales, they were increased of 1.7%, not so much, but they were still selling in whole China 3,136,000 cars. And the worldwide sales of Volkswagen brand were 6,244,000. So in 2019, Volkswagen brand, they sold more than 50% of all their cars within China. So you can see how important this Chinese market is for Volkswagen. And yes, the Volkswagen group, they have 26 production plants within China, and currently in Anting there are 17,791 employees. And I think this is it for this video, and I can really recommend to you to read this book if you're interested into the history of the car industry within China, because it gives many insights into how the competition did it, how Japanese set up and dealt with the joint venture partners he told about, and he gives some management instruction, and it's really a cool book and I can recommend it. And thanks to our teacher, to our professor, who recommended us this cool book. And this is it for me for this video. Goodbye.